Welcome once again to Talking Point. I'm Mayor Mike, and with me today are our street superintendents, Luke and Chris. We're going to talk a little bit about what happens in a snow event because winter's coming up, and before you know it, we're going to have snow, and that comes with plowing and all of the fun things that come with it. So, Chris, Luke, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, nice to be here.
Before we get started, when do you see a snow event? What happens? Let's say the forecast calls for a couple of inches tonight. How do you make that plan to address whatever snow event happens?
Sure. Depending on the type of storm coming in, I mean, Luke and I are watching the weather, daily, sometimes hourly, throughout the winter season, keeping track of what might be on the horizon. When we're expecting something a little more severe, something a little larger coming in that we might have to respond, we're typically involved in a quick webinar that the National Weather Service puts on that helps us kind of understand the timing of the storm and what type of storm we might be dealing with so we can plan ahead. With that, we try to narrow in our confidence level a little bit of what time a storm might come. From there, we will either pre-schedule or let our 4 nighttime staff throughout winter be aware of what might be coming, so that way we can be prepared. We'll have a preliminary plan, but depending on how the storm plays out, we might have to make some other decisions.
And what threshold does it take for a snow event before you set forth a plan?
I'd say, in all honesty, probably anything above and beyond an inch.
An inch or so? Okay.
Yep. Once we hit that inch, we know we're going to be dropping blades and we're going to be scraping our A's and B's. Anything above that, is typically more of a scheduled event where we're going to have crew come in and we know we're going to plow every street of the city. Once that 2-inch threshold is hit, but well before the 2 inches, we've got boots on the ground and we're here. And to just kind of add to what Chris was saying before, a lot of times after we're watching those updates with the weather system or weather forecasters, we do typically get a hold of the dispatch and kind of let them know so the PD is aware of what our plans are and what we're hoping to get done.
Yeah, well, and that's important to note. I hadn't thought of it until just now, but law enforcement plays a pretty big role in that too, because they're out on the roads doing their patrols, so they can inform you of icy intersections or some roads that may need some additional attention. We'll touch base on that a little bit later, but I know every year you get together and you form your snow and ice control plan. That's available on our website. This year's isn't on the website, but it will be soon, probably by the time people are watching and listening about this. What goes into creating that plan and doing the annual updates?
Well, for this update, we started following more of the APWA, the American Public Works Association guidelines. The plans in the past are also, very well detailed. Since Luke and I have been more involved with the SaltWise, which is an organization, throughout the state helping us reduce salt while still being effective, as well as becoming more involved with the American Public Works Association. We wanted to start aligning, ourselves with, some of the best standards and practices out there that are universally recognized throughout the public works, world. So this revamp includes a couple extra sections that wouldn't have been in some of our previous plans. So it's new things we're working on. Luke actually was part of an evaluation on some of those plans with our local chapter this year.
Well, what does that involve?
All the township cities and counties throughout the state kind of get an outline from the SaltWise organization. Kind of laying out how many of their vehicles are equipped with brine, how many of their vehicles are equipped with road temp sensors, and then you can kind of start to see where we fall in line equipment-wise and how prepared we are in comparison to, the best of the best out there. So,
aren't we the best of the best?
Honestly, we're
I was pretty sure we were.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because there's a lot of science that is behind road maintenance in the winter with the brine and the salt and sand and plowing. Let's talk about the brine, for example, because I know the city of Stevens Point has won some recognition awards through SaltWise. Tell us about this brine system, how it got implemented, and how it's actually saving us tons of money on salt.
So the city, it was about 2014, the city first started implementing, our own brine system. Since then, the city has saved, over $100,000 worth of salt, and that's at one point annually. So to consider all of that, what the brine does, in the right conditions, and we can get that on our main roads, we actually have our own brine route, which is mostly our arterial roads. If we can get that on the road, what that does is it prevents the ice from actually sticking. You'll still get snow buildup, you'll still get ice, but it creates this layer so that way when the plow blade comes through, it has a cleaner surface because it's not binding to the road, and that alone means we can put less salt down after the blade touches the road, creating a safer for the traveling public, and while using considerably less salt.
Sure.
And to add to that, actually, even if we are out on our salt routes, the A's and B's, the brine does get pre-sprayed onto the salt before it gets dispersed. The old method was more salt. You got to burn the snow off, and a lot of times if you follow a truck down a highway and they're dropping salt, you'll see it just scatter throughout the lanes, and a lot of it actually ends, a high percentage, I don't remember the number, but it's like 25 or percent or more off onto the shoulders, whereas once you get that brine onto the granular salt, it's more apt to stick and stay on the surface that we're looking to treat.
Yeah, and I think even homeowners can relate to that. You take a handful of sidewalk salt and you toss it. It bounces, rolls, tumbles. So it takes a little bit of skill, I suppose, to get it right on the spots that you need. But the brine solution is something that we do prior to events, and it actually lasts for multiple days before an event.
Yeah, depending on the weather. I mean, if we don't have precipitation or the roads aren't, to quote, sweating and getting wet, brine will stay on as long as the weather will allow us. I mean, there's some kick up from tires and traveling public, but for the most part, it'll stay largely adhered to the road surface.
So we put the brine down in preparation for a snow event. Let's say we're going to get 5 inches of snow overnight. What happens? I mean, we have crews that work during the day. They've got a regular shift that they have to do to get the job done. And we're expecting 5 inches of snow, let's say by 2 or 3 a.m. What do you do?
So in an event where we're expecting that much snow in a relatively short period of time, that would typically call for us to pre-schedule. Depending if it's the weekend or the weekday, on a weeknight we'll have 4 operators, working a 11 to 7 shift. Okay. So they'd be our first boots on the ground. They're able to contact Luke or myself, depending on who's on call, and let us know what the conditions are. From there, we can start, all right, why don't we start loading trucks, and our relief crew is going to be coming in, and we're either going to plan on, hitting our A's and B's until, depending on the time. If we're got a morning rush hour coming, well, our priorities are going to be our main arterials, our collectors, and then as the storm ends, as the snow lets up, then we would then go into our what we call C routes, which is our more residential roads.
Okay, and that actually brings up a pretty good point, because when we hit the snow routes, we have A, B, and C routes. Luke, explain to me a little bit, what is an A route? Give me some examples. What's a B route? Give me some examples. And then the tertiary or C routes are generally the last ones.
So A routes are going to be like Church Division, Center Point. B routes are going to be more of your secondary, say Jefferson Street.
Maria.
Yeah, Maria. The way they're laid out currently, and it's been this way for a long time, is every resident in town is within, I believe, 3 blocks of getting to an A or B route. Okay. So the A and B are always going to see that first line of action. We're going to be sanding or salting or scraping those streets typically first. So residents only have to drive a block or 2 or 3 to access one of those roads that have seen, us be out and active once the snow lets up, and if we've got more than 2 inches, then they're going to see us come through and scrape all those C routes, which are more of the residential streets.
Then if they're on our C routes, the A and B routes, the way it works, are actually incorporated within our C routes. So if we go all out and we're doing our C routes, we're still incorporating our A's and B routes, throughout the C routes, if that makes sense.
Sure. So let's talk about that a little bit, because we don't have designated plow drivers. Our regular employees are also trained to do the plow routes. Talk about the number of plows that we have. How many plows do we have? And give us an idea of some of that equipment, because I want to get into the science, that technology with the sensors to tell you how much sand and salt to spread. And if you want to start off with that, that's fine too. I just want to talk about the equipment that we use, the graders and things like that.
So we have 13 dedicated plow trucks within our fleet. We have other equipment that we use throughout winter for plowing, but 13 dedicated plow trucks, 2 of them are spares. Each of those trucks, or those 13 trucks, are equipped with ground temperature sensors, and then we use our system set up that, depending on what our speed is and what the ground temperature is, we have preset settings for how much salt or sand that we're going to put out on the road, in conjunction with the pre-wet. This makes it really easy to follow, the guidelines of how much salt is required. We do calibrate all those trucks every year to make sure that what the system says it's putting out, it's actually putting out. If we need to make adjustments, we will. We do that every year prior to winter, but it makes it really easy to make sure that we're putting the right amount of salt down. More salt doesn't mean faster melting, and I think that's a big misconception. So putting the right amount down helps save the city money, because salt is very expensive. Salt's about $100 a ton right now. We were fortunate enough that with our last winter being light, we didn't need to purchase any this year, but salt is it's like gold. I mean, we need to be very, very careful with the amount we're putting down due to its cost and its impact on the environment.
Yeah. But that's important to know, that the technology that we've implemented is not only saving the taxpayers money, because we're using less material, whatever it is, sand, salt, and it's also better for the environment, because we're not overdoing it. We're not guessing and erroring over. So it's really critical that people know that we are taking advantage of the technology that's out there. They've been doing it in agriculture for a very long time, not just broadcasting tons of fertilizer, but spot fertilizing, using that technology. And we have the same thing here in the city.
I think it's important to know that these trucks, just aren't a big, heavy truck with a plow on the front and spreader. There's a lot more technology into it. Another, product that we're using, or trial that we're doing this year, is actually in the blade itself. So we purchased it's called a React blade, but they're in foot sections, and each section can move up and down. Okay. So when it follows the crown of the road, or if you have potholes or uneven surfaces, the plow adjusts over the top of it. The benefit of this is that you're getting a cleaner cut off the road, so that way, again, we can use less salt. So
I think it's important to know too. Most people probably understand that the road is crowned, so water runs off. It's designed to be higher in the middle.
So when you take a flat blade that doesn't move, you're not necessarily cleaning the entire surface, which then we need to use, more of a product to keep the road safe.
Yeah, and speaking of technology, that's a great one. Just installing GPSs on the trucks, so we know who's where and how fast they're going, and what they're doing, so we can more efficiently clear all of the roads in the city. We've got a little over 300 lane miles of road, right?
Yep.
So it takes a while. And you said 13 trucks?
13 trucks.
That are appropriately named?
Yep, we did a name the plow event last year, so that was fun. A lot of creative names. So if you see our trucks out there, you'll see all sorts of goofy names on them, all kind of winter related and named by kids. So that's a fun aspect that we get to do. Other equipment in our fleet. We have a couple really large snow blowers for to keep that simple. We could go into models and names.
Well, and that's what I was going to get at too. So as we get in towards the middle of winter, right? Sure. And we understand your A, B, and C routes. Everybody's plowing, but boy, the boulevard in front of my house is starting to get a pretty big pile of snow. Sure. You go through in what we call picking up the snow. Give us an idea of what that entails.
Sure. Once during a typical winter, which was not last year, you will get that buildup either on the sidewalk on the bridge, say, or in the boulevards. Once we get to a certain point and the snow doesn't really have a place, the boulevards are used for storage for us. Mm-hmm. Once that storage is filled up, we need to come through and we need to start picking that snow. We wing it off back onto the road, run it through a blower, blow it into a truck, and haul it away.
So when you say wing it off,
bring a grader with our blade,
okay,
and
it pushes it off the boulevard into the street?
Pull it off of the boulevard without hopefully damaging any grass or trees.
And then your snowblower is a whole lot different than my snowblower, right?
Much larger.
And I think that thing is about 5 feet tall.
Yeah,
the augers,
pretty close.
And then where do we put the snow?
We've got a couple different locations. If we're downtown for short-term storage to keep our trucks moving, we will put it in the Crosby parking lot. Okay. And then when we get a stretch of weather where we're not out plowing and not needing to pick, then we'll actually haul it from there to our location out off East Maria.
East Maria, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's go a little bit further now and talk about the sidewalks for city-owned property. I know you and the Parks Department take care of all the sidewalks on city-owned property, those bridges that we talked about, or adjacent to parks. What's involved there?
Well, we have a couple different choices of equipment, if you will, depending on the storm that we got. So parks typically will do all the sidewalks that are in front of, parkland. We do trade off with them on certain areas if it makes more sense that they're going to be closer to an area, so we're not sending people all over. But for equipment, our largest equipment that we would use is we do have a truck with a plow on it if it's a heavy snow and we need to get on and really open things up. We have a smaller, it's called a Ventrac. It's kind of a heavy duty tractor, if you will, with a snow blower or a broom. And then our skid steer, which I would say is probably our most popular choice of our sidewalk guy, and that's also equipped with a snow blower and a broom, and he would go out and he would follow the routes. So we try to get our sidewalks done as soon as we can. We understand the difficulties that others face, accessing sidewalks. So sidewalks is typically always scheduled when we'd be going out and doing our C routes.
Okay. Yeah, and that's important to note because we try and hold ourselves to the same standards as regular homeowners like myself, right? Clear your sidewalk. If you got a boulevard, you have 24 hours to clear it. If you don't have a boulevard, they give you a little extra time because you have to move it back into your yard. I want to remind people that it's illegal to blow, shovel, or throw snow or any other debris into the street. So don't do that. If you're seen doing that, you will very likely get a citation. That's also pretty dangerous to do. So don't blow, push, shovel your snow into the street. That's important to note.
And if I could piggyback off of that, just a reminder to the public, when you're doing your sidewalk in front of your house, put that snow in your front yard. As I just said, the boulevard is our room for storage. So if we're plowing the street, we need that space. And then when we come through and plow, they get upset that they've got a huge window of snow in their driveway when some of that snow is snow they put in our storage.
That's probably something we should touch on too, because every year I seem to hear stories about just people yelling at our plow drivers. They're doing their job. They're trying to make the city as safe as possible. And I get the same stuff, right? There was one time, I tell this story all the time, when Madison, my daughter, was young. We were getting ready to go up to Chris's parents, my wife's parents, for Christmas. And you just got a heavy snow. So I get out there and I'm blowing the snow and clearing the sidewalk and everything. And then we load up all the presents in the truck, put Madison in the little car seat, and I literally put it in reverse, put my arm over my shoulder to look back, and the plow truck comes and whoosh, and there's this much snow in my driveway again. It happens to everybody.
It's frustrating, and we certainly understand the frustration. And one thing we'd like to add, that there's absolutely no personal beef that any of our drivers have. You know, we'll get those calls.
That kind of time on their hands to be concerned with who knows where.
Another real problem area for that is cul-de-sacs. Cul-de-sacs are very tight, and you have a truck coming through, and you don't have, depending on how many driveways are on it, you don't have a lot of spots to put that snow. We do pick cul-de-sacs when we can, especially if the snow gets to a certain point. Luke and I are experimenting. We wanted to do it more last year, but the lack of snow made it hard to judge. We're experimenting with what we're calling a cul-de-sac route that would be done with a loader.
Oh, okay.
And the idea of that is it is kind of timely for trucks that have cul-de-sacs on their routes to get in. It takes longer. So if we have someone dedicated on cul-de-sacs with a different piece of equipment, they can typically maneuver the snow a little bit more clever.
Not end up with snow in driveways as often, and able to kind of articulate around it.
Stacked in front of mailboxes, that can be a challenge. So, cul-de-sacs, depending on where you live, there's some areas, corner lots, is another one where it's unfortunate, but there's a higher likelihood of getting more snow, at the end of your driveway.
As a truck turns a corner, a right-hand turn, we're taking all that snow around that corner, and that first driveway after typically is where, science is going to work its magic, and all of a sudden all that snow is going to roll off, and it's not done on purpose.
Yeah, no, and that's important to note, that we all have to deal with the same thing. If you shovel your sidewalk early and you're diligent about it, the plow truck may come through and boom, there's more snow on your sidewalk. It's nothing personal, but the snow has to get cleared as well. So we try and do the best we can. I know we're going to see the video again this year. Every year I get comments or messages about this video. I think it was from Canada, where they have a grader that's clearing the road, and it's going like 15 miles an hour or less, and the little blade comes down in driveways so you don't get the snow in the driveway. We've talked about this for several years. None of that's practical here. That is not...
Too many driveways.
Yeah, the driveways within the city, that's great maybe for a rural area, but for a city area where there's driveways on my side of town, it's at least every 100 feet.
And there's a considerable cost difference between a grader and a truck.
Right.
Hopefully in the future there might be something, but right now there.
You can put heating coils like they have at Lambeau in our driveway.
Sure.
And that could work.
There's other teams or other towns, throughout the nation have other things that they experiment with. Yeah. But
so that's important to note too, I suppose. Let's touch on that, because with those GPSs that we talked about, we monitor the speeds.
Yeah.
The faster you go, the further the snow gets thrown. But we adjust the speeds based on conditions. You're not going to see a plow truck going by at 35 miles an hour. That just doesn't happen.
Probably really hard for the truck to do so with a snow load in front of it.
Something to remember with that, though, even the snowfall differs makes a change to our speed. Mm-hmm. If it's a heavy, wet snow, we can't drive super slow. We would just stop and spin. So you've got to have that power and speed behind you a little bit, which at times does roll that snow over onto sidewalks. Again, it's not intentional. It's just we have to get the roads cleared off.
Well, that's physics. That's how the snow moves. That's why the blades are curved.
Yep.
You're designed to move that snow off to the side and put that in the boulevard. So
I think there's also a misconception about speed. plow trucks can be really loud. If you're standing right next to one next to your driveway and a truck goes by, it's loud and it's going to sound like it's going a lot faster than it really is. So one thing that's really nice with their GPS is that when we do get those calls and we get to a chance to educate on that, and actually, hey, our driver was going 20 miles an hour at this time
at 8:15 this morning when it went past your house. That's nice, because we even have it on the garbage trucks, which is good, because you didn't come by my house early enough or whatever, and we can say exactly what time the truck went by that house. And
takes a lot of guesswork out of it.
It does. So finally, let's touch on some of the other things that happen in winter. With a plow truck, the big, heavy, awkward piece of equipment, our plow drivers are great. I've tried doing it. It's one of these snowplow rodeos. I can't drive a truck like these guys can. It takes a lot of skill. But even the best drivers have the ability to cause some damage. We hit the occasional mailbox, or we tear up lawn in the boulevard when we're using the plow blade. If that happens to me, what should I do?
Call down the streets.
Call down the streets.
Put you on a list.
Yep, we'll put you on a list. So depending on what the case is, if it's a mailbox, we'll typically, because a lot of mailbox knockdowns in winter aren't necessarily from the plow hitting.
The weight of the snow.
It's the weight of the snow, and a lot of check your mailbox posts prior to winter. A lot of them you'll find are pretty rotten. If it's typically if our plow hits it, we have our sign guy can go out. He can typically fix those. If it's a real fancy mailbox or something special, we do have a reimbursement up to $100 for mailbox hits. Yard damage, that's more prevalent in non-curb and gutter areas. And that could be a simple, especially a first snow, when you don't get a windrow on either side and the ground might still be a little soft. It's easy on a curve or just to catch an edge. And once you catch an edge, it doesn't, for a truck that big, it doesn't take much to dig in. But we do, you just call, we get you on a list, and as soon as the ground is workable, we have crews that go out and we restore the yard damage. So it's as simple as that. Please be patient.
No sense in calling in and getting angry. We'll get to it. We do it every year.
That's a good point, right? None of this is personal. It's winter in Wisconsin, and unless this is your first winter in Wisconsin, you've dealt with this stuff before. Slow down. Make sure you walk like a penguin so you don't slip and fall. Use sand or salt. Keep your sidewalks clear. Keep the approaches clear. If you live on a corner, those ramps, it's very, very important, especially for those with mobility issues, that you keep those areas clear. Now, it's a pain because when the plow comes around the corner, it's going to push the snow back in there. But we really need you to do that, and it's the law. The other thing to remind people of is fire hydrants, especially in the winter. Things get built up, and we may not always be able to find the fire hydrants in the event of an emergency. And if we do, we still have to have those firefighters clear the snow from around it. So if you can adopt a fire hydrant, keep about a 3-foot area around the fire hydrant clear. That would certainly help in the event of an emergency with our firefighters trying to find that hydrant and utilize that. Chris, Luke, is there anything that you think the general public should know before we move on?
There is a lot more thought and science behind planning the snow, and there's usually a good reason behind what we are doing. And if you have questions, feel free to call. Yep.
Well, Chris, Luke, thank you very much. Hopefully that gives the general public some idea into what goes on and the science and technology behind snow removal. Have a great winter, and until next time, I'm Mayor Mike, and we've been Talking Point.
Talking Point is produced by Mayor Mike Wiza and Stevens Point Community Media.